So today we're talking about the 2005 film Cachē, directed by Michael Haneke. And I have not seen anything from him before, but last week I was just going through some of his filmography and looking at some of the log lines, and his movies just seem awesome. Like I was so down for all of the log lines for that I read, and I talked to a few people and I said, "Oh, I'm watching Cachet," and they were just like, "Dang, Michael Haneke, he's the man. Funny Games, Piano Teacher, Amour, White Ribbon," and so yeah, I honestly did not know too much about him. I've heard of Funny Games before, but all the other movies I really hadn't known too much about. But I decided to start with Cachet. It's been on my list for a while. I think it's when I watched Cure, which is one of my favorite movies. I think I just Googled like movies like Cure. And then Cachet was one. So it was like, okay, I know it's on a streaming service I have, so I'll just put it on my list. And so, yeah, I decided it for last week. And boy, I was so happy that I chose this film. So before we start off talking about the actual plot, so this will be spoiler free first. I'll give like just some technical details, then I'll go into a short spoiler free review. Oh, what am I saying? So it was made in 2005, and it looks like from IMDb it said it had a 8 million euro budget, and its worldwide gross was 16 million US dollars. And so, hey, that's pretty good. And yeah, it did have quite a bit of critical acclaim when it came out. Apparently, it was at Cannes. It won the Best Director at Cannes. It was a front runner for the Palme d'Or and won multiple other awards as well. And so, yeah, like I said, director Michael Haneke, legend from what I've read. And he's just one that just went over my head and I hadn't really known a lot about before, but I'm definitely going to get into him now. And then leading this film are two incredible performances by Danielle Auteuil and Juliette Binoche. And I've seen Juliette Binoche before. She was in High Life, which I have seen. And I know, yeah, she was in the Three Colors movies as well. Oh, and Godzilla. I hadn't actually seen Godzilla, but yeah, she was awesome. And I don't think I know anything else that this guy's in, but yeah, he led the film. He was absolutely incredible. So, spoiler-free review first. So, like the logline here, it doesn't say too much, but a married couple is terrorized by a series of videotapes planted on their front porch. And that is just very surface level what the actual plot is. But this movie is one that you really, really want to go into and not know anything about it. And it's one that at the end of the movie, I'd highly encourage you to just think about everything that you just watch and try to make your own interpretation or just try to analyze it, because it's just such a enigmatic, mysterious movie. I mean, the name is literally translated to hidden, and there's just so much going on. I definitely really want to rewatch this one. I never really get the urge to rewatch a movie like very shortly after I've seen it, but this is one that I really just want. There's probably so many like puzzle pieces in the film that you could just get so much out of and just try to figure out what is actually going on in this film. So yeah, I'd highly recommend watching it without knowing anything, but without talking about spoilers or any information that I would want to give to somebody before watching this movie. This movie has a lot more than just the surface level plot. Yes, the base of the film is this thriller mystery about these videotapes on the porch, but it's kind of just a front for a deeper meaning. This movie deals a lot with metaphors and alluding to other things happening in the world, using the characters as pieces of a grander puzzle, as in their stories aren't really the grand story that you're really trying to take away from this film. And so that may all seem very enigmatic, and the message might be hidden in the words that I'm saying, haha, pun intended, but there is a lot going on here, and Michael Haneke, he just does everything so masterfully, and it's one of those movies where it's like, sometimes something can happen in a movie by maybe like a filmmaker that you don't know, and you don't know if it's supposed to be meaningful or not. But this movie, the way it's set up and the way everything's delivered, everything seems very meaningful and thought out. So even the most ambiguous things or something that you thought might be a goof or something that they messed up, I think after this movie, it's like nothing in this movie is accidentally put there. None of the meanings are really meant to be misconstrued. It's a very concise, there's a lot packed into this movie, and he just knows every single detail that he wanted to put in there. He knows the message that he wanted to send out, and he crafts it so masterfully, so concisely that it works so well. And as for the cinematography, it has a very mid 2000s look that I really, really like. The mid 2000s look that I'm talking about is like, it's like moving into more modern technology era. So you have like TVs and you have like still landline phones and everything, but everything feels quite dirty and not as polished as modern film stock. But there's still just like this nice mystery and intrigue to this time period that works really, really well, this movie, especially that it's dealing with these videotapes that are lower quality. But because the quality of this film isn't like top notch, super, super sharp like movies would be nowadays, it kind of blends that and kind of blurs the line between what are the videotapes and what is the movie that we're watching, and just the thematic connections that go with the actual videotapes being planted on the porch has a lot more meaning when you look back at just the grand scheme of the entire film. So yeah, so without going into spoilers still, I'd say that, yeah, the performances are incredible, and he's a master at just placing the camera and just leaving it there for a long time, letting not just like actors do their thing, which he does in the film a lot, but just letting the environment tell a story in itself and just lingering on the environment, allowing you to try to pick out certain things that are happening and try to just make connections to just try to figure out the plot, or just to try to relate it to the general ideas that the film is talking about on a more grand scale. So a lot of that spoiler-free talk is very ambiguous and might be hard to dissect, but it's a movie that it's very rewarding to actually figure everything out in the end. And it's, yeah, just looking at a few of the reviews I read online and just some of the discourse that was going about the film, it's a very satisfying movie to piece together, even if it's with the help of like people online. Because I think that I do try to make my own analysis of a movie right away, but I think just having other people's perspectives build upon what you just saw in your initial reactions is never a bad thing. I know some people might be against just like, oh, looking up reviews and everything right after you watch a movie, but I just think getting all those different perspectives about the movie and different interpretations is just, it's a good thing to just build up how you see the film and just what version of the film just gives you the most satisfaction in the end. And yeah, for this movie specifically, there is a lot of different interpretations that go along. A lot of people disagreeing in some Letterboxd and Reddit comments here. So there's a lot to unpack here. And so now I think we'll go into a bit of more spoiler territory and talk about what actually happened in the movie. And if you've seen the movie, maybe we're not really going to talk about what actually happened in the movie, but the entire narrative that's happening in this film that's relating to just past trauma and having this main character represent the entirety of France and just the grief or the guilt that the entire country has based on their previous actions. And that was a lot of what these reviews and comments were talking about, how this all is a grand metaphor for the collective grief that France was feeling at this time, because there was the Paris massacre. I forget which year. I think it was like 61 or something. So yeah, it was the collective grief because a lot of Algerians, they were protesting because France had occupied Algeria, and then there had been a revolution to try to gain back their independence. And while that was happening, Algerians in France were protesting and just, yeah, trying to protest for the freedom of their country. And while that was happening, a lot of them got killed. And in this movie, a lot of that talk, they talk about that event specifically, I think just once in the film, but it definitely is linked to a character in his past. But that just, when that nugget of information was dropped relating it to that event specifically, it puts a lot of the pieces in motion as to what this movie wants to say on a grander scale. So if we're thinking about the main character as a representation of France, and so the narrative that the film is telling you is that, yeah, they had these Algerian workers, and it was like the two parents and the son, and they were working on their farm. But as these protests were going on, it was alluded to that the parents went to those protests or were in Paris and were killed while that was happening, leaving the boy an orphan. And so that orphan was originally just on the farm with them, with the main character and his parents, and the parents had plans of adopting him. But because of some lies that the main character told, the child was eventually taken away, brought to an orphanage, and he lived up in a more more impoverished areas and just didn't really have the best of life based on his circumstances. So the direct parallels of that story to the grander narrative of the France and Algeria conflict is that this guy, it is his fault. He feels like he is to blame. Maybe he's hiding. I think it's very clear that in this film he has made up his mind that what word am I trying to say? That this other boy, now who's grown up, was the culprit of sending these videotapes on his front porch because he was mad that he told lies and made sure that he was not adopted when they were both 6 years old. And so, yeah, directly relating to like the France-Algeria conflict, where it's like, yes, this bad thing that they did in the past, and that is kind of being brought back, and they have to deal with that guilt. And the way they do it is interesting because I think directly in the narrative, it's like, okay, you were 6-year-old. You really don't really have to take too much to blame for it because, yeah, you were 6 years old, and it would be a bit crazy for this guy to come back and try to ruin your life for something you did when they were that young. I mean, it did mess up his life quite a bit, so there's that. And yeah, the direct parallels with the grander narrative is that a lot of these modern day, or at least in this context of the film, 2005, the French in this film, they might have to deal with that collective guilt of something that they didn't do specifically, but that their country did in the past, and that there's still lingering effects that are happening in the world today. And I think the main character and his family, they have quite a luxurious life. Their jobs relate to literature. There's books just lining their dinner wall, which is really cool. So yeah, both their jobs, he is a talk show host who talks about books, and his wife is a publisher. So they're very invested in the literature scene, which just in general is a trade that feels more high class compared to maybe some other trades. And so his life is very upper class, modern first world country. He is the main character, and we are supposed to sympathize with him. And I think from his perspective, there is a lot of complexities that go along with the guilt from something that happened a long time ago. And he isn't necessarily like the worst main character, but from one of the scenes near the very beginning where they were leaving the police station, and then a man was biking along and he stepped out on the street and they almost hit each other, and then they got in this dispute, and it was a black man. And I think that was just kind of setting the seeds of his racist behavior, of him just accusing his old worker guy of being the one who's sending the tapes, and he's just never backing down from that stance. And it's just that rooted racism in him, and maybe in France that still lingers to this day, whether he acknowledges it or not. So because that scene really didn't affect the entire rest of the movie. It was kind of just set in there to kind of set some of the themes, and I think that was one of the themes that is set up. And it also was like nobody apologized in that scenario. I think I read that on a Letterboxd review. I would quote it if I remembered, but it was like in that confrontation, neither him or the biker apologized or just said like, okay, yeah, that's fine, we'll go our separate ways. They were both like firmly standing in the thing where it's like, well, you should have looked where you're going when you were biking. And then the biker said, oh, well, you should have looked where you're going when you're walking across the street. And there was no resolution. And so you could say the conflict was never like settled. And so, yeah, again, that's just relating to this past conflict between France and Algeria, where that conflict was never necessarily settled. It was kind of just, swept under the rug. And I think, that has a lot to do with them living this high-class life and not really acknowledging the things that are going on behind the scenes. And that is what this shot is about, because this shot was maybe about like halfway, a bit more than halfway through the movie, where I still wasn't 100% sure of all the themes and everything that was going on. But in this scene, the wife comes home and she talks to her husband when, I don't even know the conversation. Maybe it was about one of the tapes that was just left at the doorstep, but they were talking, and then they suddenly realized, she asked, oh, is Pierrot, their son, in his bedroom? And he's like, oh no, I thought you were going to pick him up. And she's like, no, I was at work. Why would I go pick him up? And so then they're like, oh, they're realizing that their son is lost. And then this sets up this whole conflict and this whole plot point where it's like, they don't know where their son is. They go to the police, and then he accuses the Algerian guy of kidnapping his son, and they get them involved, get them arrested, and they have to spend the night in jail and everything. But in this scene specifically, it's very interesting. It stays on this shot for this angle for quite some time, and then she moves more to the foreground about where he is, and they're kind of both on either side of the frame. And in the middle of the frame, the TV stays there, and it's just showing this horrible like news. I think it was like in India, and it was just like the France's involvement in this conflict out of their country, and how there's just like this travesty that's going on, but they're just bickering about their lives and trying to find their son. That all of this information, all this tragedy that's happening in the background, they're just not noticing it. And that's kind of just dealing with the entire themes that I just talked about of sweeping it under the rug, and that there's a conflict that is going on that is not concerning them. They're not directly related to it, but it is dealing with their country and like a national identity. And it's just something that these higher class citizens are just like trying to forget and not deal with. And I think what the director Haneke is trying to do with that is just set up that, yeah, as a country, France, maybe they're just trying to, just sweep these past events, these conflicts that they were clearly in the wrong for under the rug, and just not deal with them, move forward with their first class or first world country. And yeah, those roots of hatred and racism are still lingering on, and they're just ignoring them. This shot, I noticed the TV because there was like the subtle TV news voice that was happening in the background. You couldn't really tell what it was saying, but as they were arguing, it's like I noticed that the TV is just a bright, different color. It's like video that's going on in the center of the screen, and it's like it's very obvious and very subtle at the same time, because their conversation is like a very important one in the actual narrative of what's going on. Their son's lost, and they've had their conflicts, their tension before, and so it's a very like important conversation that's happening. But some people might get swept away in that conversation, but very clearly in the center of this frame, there's this TV showing this news of this conflict that's France involved with. And I think that was just, I noticed it when it was happening in the film, and I didn't quite connect it to everything. But after reading up on this film, I was like, yes, that definitely makes a lot of sense of why it's there. And yeah, that shot was just incredible. One of the examples of just lingering shots that just works so well, where he just places down the camera, and it's not just the characters that are doing the just acting everything out. That's not just everything that's going on in the frame. There's just so much that's going on in these static shots that just works so well. And talking about static shots, this is just an iconic static shot from film history, because the film starts with this shot and it goes on for like 3-4 minutes. And so there's the opening credits that there's a bunch of names going across the screen, but as it's happening, there's, people walking across the street and everything. And when you start watching the film, you're just like, okay, so we're just in this neighborhood. Maybe there's some clues. Maybe some people are walking by that I have to pay attention to. You don't really know what's going on. You're just analyzing everything that's happening in the frame. And then it's revealed right after the credits go through that this frame is one of the videos that the family was watching. So they rewind this frame and they watch a woman walk out the door. And it was the wife, actually. And so you hear their voices as they rewind it. And it's like, oh yeah, right there, I walked out the door. It sets up this unsettling, voyeuristic nature of this shot. And just, it goes immediately from just this quaint neighborhood that you really have no investment in yet. And like, just, 5 minutes in, you're like, oh, now this is a very disturbing image, because somebody might have just sat there for a long time recording this. They said it's for like a few hours, and it was just video of their house. So they go back to this footage quite a few times within the film, and it just becomes so much more unsettling, because it's somebody's trying to, they recorded this and they're putting VHSs on their doorstep. And alongside that is the using the videotapes sets up a really, really cool phenomenon in this movie, where you don't know what is a videotape and what's just actually happening, because this location is the central premise for the film, their house, whether it be inside or outside. But this shot and this location happens a few times in the film, and you're not sure whether it's somebody recording them or whether it's just like an actual camera inside the narrative of the film. Because there's one where it's like the father and the son, they're walking from the door to the car, which is in like the just where the camera kind of sits. That's where his car is. The camera's a bit to the right of this perspective, and you're like, okay, is somebody recording this right now? And then the camera pans, and they walk very clearly right past it, so it's obviously not something that's actually in the film, as in something there's not a physical camera right where it is, but it makes you doubt it every single time. And the initial setup this thriller setup of just people watching and just the unsettling nature of somebody watching you, because there was nothing inherently dangerous about somebody watching you and sending you these videotapes. Just the fact that you're being surveyed and constantly watched is just enough to set this entire plot in motion, and is a spark that just created so much conflict within the family and just with our protagonist. And so yeah, just dealing with the medium of film within the film was really, really cool to see. And that leads me to the next plot point that we're talking about, is who actually left the footage, who left the films, and who sent the notes, who made the phone calls. And reading about this movie online, there's a lot of different theories that are going along. One of the leading theories is that nobody actually did, and it was kind of just the main character's grief is manifesting in these videos and in these phone calls and these messages that are being left, and it's kind of just setting his downfall, if you want to call it, in motion, just setting the entire conflict in motion. And it's like this thing that he's swept under the rug in his mind, which is the telling lies about the Algerian kid to get him kicked off the farm. And that's just something that he has tried to suppress in his mind, but it keeps on coming up in his mind and in his dreams. He mentioned that. And this is like the manifestation of just those memories, whether it's not like directly about the kid and what happened and the lies that he told, but it's just like the spark that is igniting those memories. Because there was a shot, or there was a, not specifically a shot, but a plot point in the film where it's like they're having a dinner with a few friends, him and his wife, and then there's a doorbell, and he goes down and there's nobody there. So it's like everyone in the audience were like, okay, yeah, somebody's definitely there. Maybe he'll find the person. Maybe they left something. But he walks right out. He looks both ways. He looks straight. He doesn't see anything. And then as he's closing the door to go back in, the door doesn't close all the way. And he bends down, and then there's a videotape. It's like he would have 100% very clearly seen that videotape if he walked out. If the door didn't even close when it hit it, that wouldn't make sense. If you open the door, it would have hit it when it was open as well. So it kind of felt like the videotape just manifested right then and there, as if it's just a plot point that is, terrorizing them, his past, his terrorizing him through these actual videotapes. And the second theory is that the Algerian guy's son and the main character's son are in cahoots, and they're the ones leaving these messages. As for the motive, I'm not sure why. It's definitely alluded to in the very, very last shot of the film as the credits are rolling, because I definitely notice it, is that, okay, there's definitely going to be something important with the shot. They're not just going to cut back to the school right at the very end. So, yeah, you can see that his son, Poirot, he's leaving school, and then, lo and behold, the Algerian guy's son is there, and they come down, they have a conversation. You really cannot make out anything that they're saying. They have a conversation, and then they go their separate ways. And so it's just kind of connecting those two together. And also throughout the film, there's the underlying just plot point of the kid just having something that's wearing on him, because he just felt very distant to his mother, and then he left the house and he didn't say where he was going, and then he just said, oh yeah, I was just at my friend's. So who knows what he could have been doing at those times, and it's like he could definitely have been up to something. There's also allusions to that he was very annoyed with his mom because he mentioned that she was talking to another man at a restaurant, and that he noticed that, and that he thought she was cheating on his dad. And I think the links to her cheating on the husband are definitely there, and I think that's definitely what happened, because just the way that they were interacting in that one scene in the restaurant, which is right here, was a little more touchy-feely, him kissing her hands and just holding her hand and everything. And again, just another subtle plot point that he's putting in this film, which was just great to see. I don't know exactly how it's dealing with the entire narrative of the film, but it's just like, I think that definitely is something that happened, something subtle. There's probably a meaning that I just need to rewatch it and understand why this is an important thing that happens in the film. But in this shot, I don't know if it's important or not, but that guy in the background is what my eyes were glued to while I was watching this scene. It's like a very emotional scene of her just like, breaking down and just confiding in this guy, one of their friends. And in the background, it was just this guy, and he keeps on looking over. And it kind of looks like, he's looking at her. Maybe he's like looking at the camera, but it's like he definitely, yeah, she is crying, making like a tad bit of a scene. But usually, if you see something in public, you're not going to like explicitly just stare at them a lot. But like he was staring. He was definitely staring. And yeah, maybe there's something up with him. And there's nothing alluding to him being bad in any way or just being related to anything. But he was just like, yeah, he's just creeping in the background. And it's just something I noticed. And it made me unsettled while I was watching it. It was just, yeah, very interesting. That's my theory that I'm going off of. That he was the mastermind all along. And Hanke just dropped this nugget of information in this one scene. But yeah, there's that. So yeah, dealing with those two theories, one of just like the videotapes manifesting, and then two of the Algerian son in cahoots with his son to actually make this happen. As for motivation for the two sons, I don't know why. I mean, I guess the Algerian son has a motivation because he can kind of interpret that he ruined his dad's life. But why would he be in cahoots with his son as well, with the French son? But yeah, there's a lot to unpack there because, yeah, the scene where the Algerian son is in the elevator and he's like confronting him at work. Oh, I forget what he says exactly. He says like, I just wanted to see how everything's weighing on you. It's like, he's like, I need to talk to you. And it's like, he never really says anything explicitly, anything like, it's like, okay, why did you actually just want to talk to me? You didn't say anything important. But in the end of the conversation, he says, I just wanted to see a man who's dealing with his guilt or something like that. He's definitely linking his father's life to this man who quote unquote ruined it. And yeah, he still has a bone to pick with him. So yeah, I think all the stuff with the Algerian son was great, and it's just so unsettling. That elevator ride just was, yeah, it's like, oh, when he got in the elevator, you're just like, oh my gosh, guy, please, he's at work, oh my goodness, and he's gonna start a scene and everything. It was great. Yeah, just so many moments of just quiet things that are happening, whether it be just like a camera just lingering on the house, whether it be this guy just standing in the elevator at the same time, whether it be just, yeah, a guy in a coffee shop just like looking over. There's so many just quiet moments that just make the film so unsettling, and just the nature of the voyeuristic just themes of the film set up right away just make everything seem uncomfortable, because the ideas of just like being watched, because all the videotapes dealt with like things that nobody would really know, because there's a videotape that was given to him that was of his childhood house. It's like, who would know that? And of course he links it to the Algerian man, but nobody else would know that. And so just the idea of somebody knowing everything about you and just sending these tapes of, yeah, one of the tapes was him having a conversation with the Algerian man, which makes his mind, I'm just like, okay, he definitely did this because it was literally a camera plotted in his house. But again, maybe it's just a manifestation of the director placing those in there to kind of stir up the pot, really. But man, Cachē just has so much going for it. I feel like there's so many other things that I could talk about this film, but I just there's so much going on with this film, and I'm really, really excited to watch it again and just see if I can notice anything else. Yeah, like I said before, I don't really have a desire to rewatch films like directly after I just watched it, but this movie, as the title is aptly titled, there's just so many hidden things, and it's just one of the most subtle, rewarding movies of all time, honestly, and I just can't give enough praise to this film. It was absolutely incredible. I might even move it up to 5 stars because, yeah, I really, really did love this film. Highly recommend it. And yeah, I know I said, like, if you're this far and listening to me, you probably heard me talk about all that, but like, if you haven't seen the film, just go watch it. Even if you know everything that I just said, just like go watch it. It's an incredible movie, and I think it'll be rewarding upon a rewatch. That's just my prediction. I haven't watched it twice or anything, but man, I just can't wait to watch it again. Next week is October 3rd. We'll be talking about Hellraiser. Looking forward to it.